Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 80 Days. This is LP Cricket here, take you on through the rest of our journey. I think we should be getting fairly close to the end now. If you guys remember from last time, we made it all the way to San Francisco. All the way to San Francisco. So now we have to try and figure out our best route. We can continue east, or there's always the option of heading to New Orleans, because someone had mentioned that New Orleans to Puerto Delgado, fastest route was through New Orleans, so let's go ahead and stay in our hotel. San Francisco seemed less a city and more a ravenous beast bent on consumption of everything, even in itself. Within the ever-expanding city limits, enormous steam-powered drills and diggers flattened hills, straightened roads and reformed neighborhoods, and dumped the resulting rubble and stone into Mission Bay. I headed towards Chinatown to eat. It was a warren of crowded wooden and brick houses, temples, businesses, herbalists, laundries, and market stalls, selling fruit and flowers. I was interested in conversation, so I decided to approach an older man in European clothes. He offered me a cup of green tea when I introduced myself. "You are very well dressed," I remarked approvingly. A most excellently cut jacket." He chuckled and smoothed his crisp shirt. "Many of my friends, they say, 'Lynn, you talk to foreigners, you wear their clothes,' and I say to them, 'I am American now, and you are too.'" He pointed at a young man with his hair in a queue. "Look at him, with his old-fashioned hair. There is a law against it here, but he wears it like that, the fool." "What a ridiculous law. But that is your tradition. Why is there a law against it?" I asked. "It hurts no one, surely." "We must let go of our old culture," Lin counseled. "We are American now." "But you are Chinese American," I disagreed. "Why should you give up everything for the American dream?" Alright. That leaves at 5 p.m., so I think we can go explore real quick. I sloped towards recently constructed Long Bridge, which was crowded with families out for a stroll and people fishing for silvery smelt with long poles. In the water was a jangle of rowing boats racing each other and boatmen taking passengers out to Mission Rock. Cheers and good-natured shouts emitted from a halfway house in the middle of the bridge. I scoured the waters for boats we might take, but there seemed to be none heading out. All were fishing. A man, red-faced and somewhat the worse for drink, bumped into me. I excused myself politely, and he made an apology in return, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "Oh, hello," he exclaimed. "You don't sound like you're from around here." "You do not sound American either," I retorted. "No matter. I was Dutch once in a past life, but now I am as American as President Grant. This is a land of newcomers. You a prospector?" "I am a traveler," I said. "I am traveling around the world." "Oh," he laughed. "Oh, yeah? And I'm a Navajo chief." I insisted on the truth, sketching out in brief some of my adventures with my master. "What? Really?" His eyes widened and he slapped his thigh. "That's incredible." A brown-skinned woman slipped her arm into his. I looked for an introduction and the man smiled quickly. "Ah, my manners," he shook his ruddy face. "I am Anders, and this is my wife, Jenny." "A pleasure to meet you," I kissed her hand. She was surprised, but smiled. "Always a pleasure to meet Anders' friends." She looked askance at the whiskey flask in his hands, but seemed to find me unobjectionable. I hesitated, the obvious question about her origins on the tip of my tongue. "Are you—" I let my rather uncouth question trail off in embarrassment. She laughed with full-throated pleasure. "I am of the Modoc tribe, what the new Americans call Indians." Jenny rolled her eyes. "I do not mind your surprise. Most of my tribe has been taken to the Klamath Reservation in Oregon." "But You are not with them, I observed, realizing my faux pas as the words tumbled from my unthinking lips. Jenny sucked in a deep breath. I left my tribe, she whispered. Anders squeezed her hand. I fell in love. In this world, women leave their families for their husbands. I made a home of my choosing, which is more freedom than my tribe can claim. Anders whispered something in Jenny's ear, and she laughed, though I feared I had opened an old wound with my prying questions. I nodded and found my way back to Monsieur Fogg, who was sitting drinking tea with a disconsolate frown. It tastes like soap, he remarked, but would say no more. Pacific. We can get rid of that. Let's figure out when San Pedro leaves. Tomorrow at 9. Fabulous. Before going to bed, I ran a few errands for the hotelier and earning 50 pounds. Alright, let's embark. We went down to the wharf to find a route onwards, but it took us a few attempts to find a sailor who looked experienced enough to handle a boat whatever the conditions might occur. We settled into a fishing boat whose name was Salvador, piloted by a Hispanic lady. I named it after my husband, she told, as she slipped the painter, and we pushed out onto the water. And where's your husband now? I inquired. She jerked one thumb downwards, disappeared beneath the waves, friend. I gulped, but we were too far from the shore to turn back already. Greetings. San Pedro, New Orleans. Speaking of trains, I understand Atlanta is linked to Washington aboard the Piedmont Airline. Okay. Orleans to Havana. Absolutely, one can fly aboard the Western Coast. But now, listen, I don't even like fish, do you? Indeed. And my soul is glorious, but I still despise the smell. Okay. Port-au-Prince. To Nassau. Alright then. The boats scudded through the water, roughly following the sandy coastline and rocky cliffs of the shore. Do you make this journey often, madam? I asked, looking for some reassurance that we would arrive intact. No, she answered. Mostly I fish the San Francisco Bay, but I don't mind the change. How long have you lived in California? My husband and I came down in the gold rush, she told me. I spent every day for a year panning the streams and never found a cent's worth. My husband built a boat and caught fish to feed the other panners, and he made a nice little business out of it. So you became a fisherman. We did, though there was plenty of other people doing that too. A rush on one thing brings a rush on everything, she sighed. It was a crazy time. People would put up with just about anything because they figured they'd be rich next week. Then when it started to dawn on people they were never going to strike any gold themselves, and here they were. Picture it. A whole country's worth of people losing their hope together. Things are settling now, I asked. Things are changing. I'm not sure how it'll turn out. They keep building things. That seems to help people feel settled. Alright, one last touch-up before we get there. The second day, Captain Dolores stayed at the tiller through lashing rain that made my position working the jib sail harder. Water slicked the deck and made my fingers icy cold, only for the ropes to burn them as the wind pulled this way and that. More than once I was all but hauled overboard, and it took all my considerable dexterity to remain upright. The storm lasted well into the evening, and we lost several hours, but finally the wharf at San Pedro came into view. "We land," called Dolores. "Take the tiller." There was no moment to lose. I raced to the back of the boat, just as the captain had already dived overboard, painter in her hand. She was surely lost, but my fears only lasted a moment when her head reappeared, bobbing like a seal's, and with strong strokes she swam to the shore, looped the rope through an anchor rig, and hauled us in. We docked and secured ourselves with 3 more lines. "Madam, that was quite a dangerous move," I cried. "Could you not have sailed her in?" "Not with a wind like that at our back," she snapped. "We would have been smashed into the rocks. Salvador has already had 1 hole put in him. I do not know if he can take another. And anyway, we lived." And then her tension came out in a laugh like a rolling barrel, and I could not help but join with her. Let's check out real quick, see what this leaves tomorrow night. Let's explore. We were waiting near the wharf, looking out over the rolling Pacific Ocean on the new town area of San Pedro. I decided to walk into the old town, but found it largely a wasted trip. Though the streets were laid out in a well-ordered grid, the plots themselves were mostly empty, either half-built or half-taken down. Presumably, this place was coming alive with the building of the railway, a view which the more cheerful residents seemed to share. "Alonzo Horton will bring us right," one man told me firmly. "It's all about the location, you see. We tried building the city here, didn't work, so he's rebuilding it all over there." He pointed back in the direction of the water. "He's already fixed up San Diego the same way." "And what is better about over there, exactly?" The man shrugged. "It's hard to see, but when someone has the conviction that Horton has, they must be right." Foolish words, surely, I thought, but then I remembered the circumstances under which I was on this particular adventure around the world, and fell necessarily silent. I wandered a while longer, but found nothing more in those empty lower districts. Sometimes there is a great lightness in being a tourist, forever leaving behind the great problems of one location and another. Alright, let's hit up this hotel. We made ourselves comfortable for the night, and I went to stretch my legs and fell into discussion with the nervous Chinese girl who had lost a purse, which I helped find, and from whom I learned that the quickest way to Salt Lake is through Vegas. I paid £1 for the information, and then she nodded and then moved away. Alright, so we've got till 9. Let's hit the market real fast, see if there's anything decent that we can sell. Alright. Nothing. That's pretty decent priced. Okay. Train's about to leave. We boarded the Texas and Pacific Railway, a decent stretch of railroad by all counts which joined the west coast to south. It lacked the speed of an airship, but at least it was reasonably comfortable. Alright, let's wait. Special report from Minsk. The French are the worst for short memories. Alright then. The first stretch of the railroad ran through the empty deserts of northern Mexico. I kept my eyes peeled for bandits. I assured my master was comfortable as we traveled. There was nothing outside the window to distract us. San Francisco Chinatown riots. Looks like we escaped just in time. The train pulled jauntily into Albuquerque Station, and from the window I saw a group of gunmen spitting into spittoon as they talked by the station entrance. Albuquerque seemed, on brief glance, a lawless place, so we left it quite happily behind. The train gathered speed once more, and we were off once more. Mysterious French pirate seizes steamer off coast of Honolulu. Ooh. So we are mysterious pirates now. The railroad turned from east to south at Dallas, which I glimpsed from the window and took an immediate disliking to, though I cannot pin down exactly why. Then we moved onwards through endless prairie lands toward the sun. Greetings. New Orleans to Havana. What else? We need to get to Nassau. I wish I knew, but the most efficient way to Nassau from here is through Atlanta. What more can you tell me? My childhood sweetheart had quite an adventure by the Pride of Pilar from Nassau to Ponta Delgada. Where does New York hit? Oh, straight to London. Decision time. This stretch of track was unremarkable. I passed the time in conversation, trying to gather information for our next leg, discovering from a charming Irish soldier that the Haitians in Panama City have some of the fastest aircraft in the world, but these strange ships have feathers. We entered the evening, and the coastline became visible, and we entered the heady surroundings of New Orleans. Alright, it's already 2. If we want to get to New York, it arrives in a few days, leaves at 2 p.m. Arrives next Wednesday, so that's only 7 days away. That's pretty good. Well, let's get out and see some of our stuff that we have. Houston, New York. Atlanta. So we may want to stop in Atlanta. Probably would be best just to go ahead and head to New York. So let's can't explore, so let's stay in the hotel. We can explore in the morning since the train doesn't leave till 2. I met Death in a smoke-wreathed, red-lit bar in New Orleans as the jazz band struck up another tune. He offered to buy me a bourbon. Holy Mother of Heaven, I blasphemed succinctly as some of the other patrons snickered. Death pulled off his mask to reveal handsome cafe au lait features and dark green eyes, and then extended a skeletal hand to me. A fine costume, I remarked. Merci, mon cher. I am Death at our neighborhood Mardi Gras, and I am practicing my role. He took my proffered hand and brought the back of it to his lips for a gallant kiss. He flicked me a rather unmistakable look under his dark lashes. To be so clearly desired by Death was unnerving. I found my feet shaking and stepped back. He tilted his face to the side. "Do you find my color displeasing?" he asked with a lazy smile. "Not that." He laughed, low and pleasing. "It matters little, mon cher. There are many white men in New Orleans who do. In spite of it, I am a free man. Death resumed his mask. I do not believe in prophecy, but the chill of his cold fingers on my face sent a thrill of fear through me. Abandoning dignity, I ran from the bar, nerves rattling like knuckle bones in a cup. Let's see what this does. I spent a few hours in exploration, learning ways in which we might travel onwards. Okay, let's hit up Atlanta. Ooh, cut that one close. The Piedmont Airline from New Orleans was not, in fact, an airline at all, but according to its advertising, the fastest railway in America. Hardly a bold claim, considering there were only two truly significant lines in the continent, but nonetheless, it gave my master some satisfaction when he saw the slogan on the wall of the compartment. Greetings, Monsieur Lagarde. Tickets, please. Atlanta to New York. On the subject of trains, I've heard you can get to Ottawa from Winnipeg aboard the Canadian Pacific Railway. New York to London. I understand you can get to London from New York aboard the Henrietta, but the fare is over £5,000. They say the quickest way to London from here is via Washington. Ponta Delgada. Let's just say some buyers will pay well for cowboy boots from Ponta Delgada. But answer me this, do you play football? Yes. I am trying to start a league back home. London. That is beyond my remit, Monsieur. Domino's? You are too kind. Alright, New York. I could not possibly tell you anything about that. So helpful. I wonder when it ends. Oh, there we go. Sometimes those conversations last forever, and other times they're just cut off real quick. So I don't understand if it's just set that way, or if there's a certain way to ask the right questions to get out of there. We settled ourselves in a carriage with one other occupant, an extremely large man who introduced himself as Charlie Sullivan, a lad from Birmingham, who was most impressively sculpted. Nice and swole, especially around the neck and upper arms. His mustaches were, nonetheless, perfect. I asked what had taken him to New Orleans, and he grunted, "Boxing." "You fought in a competition," I interpreted. "There was an exhibition," he said. "I won. Third round knockout." I gulped. However, Monsieur Fogg's interest had been increasingly sharply throughout the conversation. "You are trained," he demanded keenly, "or self-taught?" "I've got a manager," Sullivan replied. "He tells me what to hit." "Excellent, excellent," Monsieur Fogg enthused. "I want to hear all about it." I sat back and enjoyed the conversation. The details of boxing are more intricate than one might expect, and hearing the business of cut and thrust delivered in Sullivan's so very English tones were quite informative. We disembarked a little later at Atlanta, and I sighed with relief, as though sharing a compartment with Monsieur Sullivan had resulted in less air to breathe for the last few hours. Alright. Train to New York leaves at 2. It's 150 pounds. Go back to London. 10. They say through Washington, but I bet that just means up through New York and on. So let's head back to our hotel, spend the night. Atlanta, at the heart of Georgia, is a busy city with construction on every corner. Americans, it seems, do everything by hand. and there were no signs of automata or even steam-powered lifters. Instead, work gangs with pulleys and ropes lifted long beams and stone into the place. Still, the mood of people was positive enough. "We may not be much to look at today, mister," declared Stanley Goodman, owner of Goodman's and Goodman's, a curious hardware store, bakery, and bookshop into which I stopped to buy something for lunch. "But in a few years' time we'll be state capital, and after that, who knows?" "We are going around the world," I told him cheerfully. "By train?" he demanded. "I know Europeans are in love with their airships, but they won't last the ways rails will. You'll see. You'll run out of hot air or whatever it is you use to keep the things afloat." "You may be right," I concurred. "I've traveled by several airships, and I am, shall we say, unconvinced." "Too right," Monsieur Goodman agreed. "To my mind, shall we say, they stink. Now excuse me, I've got a shop to run." I was impressed with the ambition on display, since the town seemed to me to be more a crossroads of the railways than a city in its own right. And what place did railroads have in humanity's future above the clouds? "Day 60, Monsieur Fogg murmured that night in his sleep, and still some distance yet to travel." "We should make it, though." Let's check when this departs. It's 2, right? Yes. Alright. We got time to explore. I walked the streets a while, discovering the possibilities for how we might make progress. Let's hit the market. Sell that. Sell that. Go ahead and hit up that train. The great train stations of the Americas were truly sights to behold, cathedrals to the majesty of the railways. They will stand for all time as the country grows in strength, or at least so say the billboards and marketing stands that line the walls of these colossal temples to the large-scale endeavor of tying up a wild country with knots of steel track. I wondered if my master had waited for one more year, how much easier our journey would have been. Perhaps in 10 years the idea of 80 days will seem ludicrous, and people will complete such journeys in a mere fortnight, or even faster. But if they do, what will happen to the joys of travel? Alright, what about our journey? Day 60, I believe. There are only a few days remaining. What have you learned about New York? Nothing. London. I have a terrible headache. Very well. I passed the train journey, talking to other passengers, trying to gather information for our next journey. I encountered a charming American seamstress and had a pleasant if unproductive conversation that whiled the hours away. Fogg said to have crossed the date line, but will extra day be enough? The train pulled into New York with a great issuing of steam that blew up into the darkening skies. We disembarked to the faintest smell of salt air. The edge of the Atlantic awaited. Surely we could not be far from home now. Right. Let's hit the market. So that. So that. Let's figure out when the train leaves in 2 days. If it leaves in 2 days, we've got enough time to explore. because I don't want to negotiate yet, because last time that happened, I kind of messed that up. I was pickpocketed in New York. I seized the thief's hand, still in my pocket. You tangled with the wrong Frenchman, I exclaimed in triumph. The little thief looked up at me with lashed eyes. I realized belatedly that the thief was a young girl, barely 10. I released my grip slightly, and she took the opportunity to curse in a thick Irish accent and bite me. I held on despite the inconvenience, and finally she grinned at me, teeth stained with my precious life's blood. Are you done, little vampire? For now, the girl muttered. What's it to you? I looked down at my bloody arm. Truly, it was a salutary lesson not to let my guard down in strange climes. Don't steal again, I commanded sternly. As she returned my possession, she agreed she would not ever again. Cross her heart, though her expression was shifty. I relaxed my grip and she slithered away and lost herself in the crowd. I made my way back to our hotel before anything more untoward could befall my delicate person. Okay. Let's go ahead and negotiate. Stetson hat should change their minds. I think we can do that. Tomorrow at 3. Alright. Stay at our hotel. We passed an anxious night. With our 80-day deadline looming, every sunset seemed to carry extra weight. With what remained of the day, I starched the collars of our shirts to better prepare us for our inevitable departure. Okay. Let's get out of here. We left New York aboard the Henrietta, an old Confederate airship converted to a transatlantic mail carrier. We would reach London in 3 days, barring any unexpected delay. Adventurer Fogg expected back shortly. Let's hope. The ocean tore along beneath us. I enjoyed talking to no one. There was nothing I needed to know, no one to charm, flatter, or beguile into giving us aid. There was only the wind and the time, and we couldn't control neither. Passepartout, my master demanded. Make us go faster, if you would. I approached the captain. Faster, you say? It can be done, but it would destroy the engines. We want no risk, no danger. And I promise you we will be in London in 2 more days. Agreed. No reason to risk our trip. Onshore Fogg looked out of the observation deck windows with perfect calm, and there was no reason to be concerned. We were safely within our 80-day window. I could not wait to stride into the Reform Club and claim our prize. I spent the remaining time embarking on the writing of this account, though I found already the details of our early adventures had grown vague and indistinct. We tethered at the airship dock in Hyde Park and felt for the first time in 64 days the feel of English soil under our shoes. At long last we had returned to London, and in good time to win the wager. All right. Return. I seized my master by the collar and threw him into one of the steam carriages idling on the banks of the Serpentine in Hyde Park. To the Reform Club, I shouted, telling the driver we were on urgent business for Her Majesty the Queen. Drive as though the fate of the British Empire depends upon you, sir, I exhorted. Drive. There is no need for such unseemly haste, Passepartout, my master noted, but I was a man possessed. The streets of London seemed comforting and familiar as they flashed past my well-traveled eyes. The carriages were mostly horse-drawn, and gas lamps rather than electricity lit our way as we raced down Pall Mall. The carriage barely shuddered in a steam-hissing stop before I dragged my master from his seat and up the steps to the imposing doors of the Reform Club. I released him only when we reached the great saloon, where my master's 5 antagonists stood from their chairs, gaping in an attitude of great shock. Monsieur Fogg only straightened a little and said in his calm voice, "Gentlemen, I am here." The room erupted into cheers, and I staggered to the nearest chair and collapsed heavily into it. My hands shaking, I realized as though a spell had suddenly broken that we had succeeded, and my master had won £20,000. With the 4,000 we began with in our remaining funds, it was a profit of over 17,000, hardly a meager sum. My heart began to beat again, and I saw for the first time the crowds who had forced their way into the club to witness the momentous occasion. A journalist in a dark blue bonnet caught my eye. "And you must be the loyal valet Passepartout," she said. "Ah, madam, you have a sharp eye, for indeed I am." I bowed with a flourish. All of London has been feverishly following Phileas Fogg's progress in the papers. She swept her gaze over me and scribbled furiously in her notebook. "Your master will be tomorrow's headline, or I'll eat my hat." It is a fine hat," I agreed. She laughed. "Then I will be glad not to have to eat it." I pushed my way through to Monsieur Fogg, who had nearly been swallowed by congratulatory crowds. "You have won the bet, monsieur," I told him, and seized my master by the hand and shook it, as though we were two equals, and not merely a master and a servant. Monsieur Fogg pressed my hand warmly, and did not remark even once upon the impropriety of my gesture. Indeed, though his cool gaze did not so much as waver or soften, I believe he welcomed the chance to shake my hand. "Any gentleman would be fortunate to call you his valet, and you have been a worthy companion to me besides," Monsieur Fogg said, and I knew that from him there could be no higher praise. "Mr. Fogg, Mr. Fogg," the blue-bonnet journalist cried, interrupting our conversation. "What next for the great adventurer Phileas Fogg and his loyal valet Passepartout?" My master looked at me. I returned the glance. I have always wondered what is at the center of the earth. I looked around at faces of the assembled crowd and quirked an eyebrow. Anyone care to make a wager? Monsieur Fogg refrained from rolling his eyes. "I believe," he said with great deliberation, "that tonight I will have supper and go to bed. Come, Passepartout, it grows late." "Yes, Monsieur Fogg," I said, and followed. Hooray! Celebrated Englishman Phileas Fogg wins round-the-world wager. Journey completed in 64 days despite the sheer size of the world, love-struck valet, and airlift by pirates in Europe. Dang. Could not imagine traveling that many miles. Suave, good, flamboyant, strong valet, comfortable relations, 17 out of 169 cities. That would be a trip to try and hit as many cities as possible, but still maintain the 80 days. I am not that much of a strategist, so I would probably royally fail. But this game has been fun so far. I've enjoyed the ideas of going back and forth from city to city, planning out your routes, searching through the markets, trying to maintain your cash flows at a reasonable size, so that, and I obviously wasn't aware until we hit Atlanta, I think, that the trip from New York to London was going to be so expensive, but luckily we were able to keep our money up and afford that trip. But again, so this has been 80 days. If you guys have enjoyed this, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to move on to another game. Just got to figure out which one. I picked up Hellblade yesterday, and that one looks absolutely fantastic. So I know my plan was to start from the top of my list and move down alphabetically, hitting each game in that manner. but I don't know if I'll be able to refrain from playing Hellblade for that long, so we'll see. But anyway, hope you guys are enjoying what I'm putting out, so I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.